Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and welcome back to our Unity 3D platformer tutorial series. Now, in our last episode, we finally finished up the basic movement setup that we have for our player going. There's one tiny little niggling issue that we're going to fix up in a second, but most of this episode, we're going to take a look at how to add pickups to our player. So we're going to add up a pick-upable gold bar for our player to be able to pick up, and we can keep track of how many bars we've picked up, how much gold we've collected for the player. So first things first is I'm just going to play this, and we'll see as soon as we play, our player does a little bit of a jump to start out with, which is kind of a little bit annoying. You don't really want that happening in your little level. So what we need to do is when the player jumps, at the moment we have a bit of a transition duration, which is 0.25 to starting the jump. And then coming out of the jump, we also have 0.25. So we're actually going to set both of those back to 0. Like this, which makes sense for the jump animation in general. But now if we press play, you see straight away our player just goes straight down to the ground. So when we jump and land, if we're moving, we're going to be running like that. But if we jump and fall to the ground, we kind of snap down to the ground, which I suppose isn't really what we want. If we put this back up to 0.1, it might look a bit smoother. It's a little bit smoother when we do that. But it's fine. That fixes the problem that we have. Oh, sorry. I just realized I went the wrong way on that. That's not when we go up. That's when we go down. So we'll switch it back from when we're going from jump to idle. It'll be 0.1. And we'll see. There we go. We land on the ground like that. And we just kind of bring our arms smoothly into position. But as you can see, when we stop and start it again, our player starts in the right animation that we want him to start to. So that's perfectly fine. That's just that little thing fixed up. So let's move on then to actually setting up our game to be able to pick up little collectibles. So if we're going to pick up little golden bars, we're going to need to actually add them into the game. So in the resource pack linked down below the video, there will be a folder called Free Low Poly Gold, which is a open source kind of free asset. I'm going to go into our assets folder here. I'm going to create a new folder that we'll call models. I'm going to move into there, and I'm going to click and drag the free low poly gold folder over into there, and we'll wait a second for it all to import in, and we can go into that folder, and we've got a bunch of stuff in here. There's crates and there's various different gold bars and things like that, but we're going to use gold 01 here, or actually we'll use gold 02, I think. So I'm just going to switch to our scene view. I'm going to click and drag and drop that in there. You can see it drops in as very, very, very small, so that's not very much what we want to have. So we're going to make it a bit bigger. We're going to make it 4 by 4 by 4 on scale, so it's a little bit bigger in the world. And then we're going to make another object to hold this gold bar. So we're going to create a new empty object that we'll call gold bar, and then we're going to click and drag the gold we just made into the center of that, and we're going to make sure that it's always at the exact same position of its parent kind of holder. So we're going to set the position 0 and on the X, Y and Z axis, so they're all perfectly 0. We'll set the rotation to be 0 as well for now, and that's perfectly fine up there. And then when we want to move the object, we make sure we have the gold bar selected and not the child, and then we can move it around within the world as much as we want, basically. Okay, so we've got this little gold bar now. Let's make it look a little bit more interesting, because at the moment it just kind of hangs here and does nothing. So we're going to add a little animation to this. But before we add an animation, we're going to make sure that we can use it over and over and over again in our game. So rather than having to like copy this whenever we want to make a new one, what we can do is go into our assets folder. We're going to create a new folder called prefabs. And we'll open that up, and then we're going to drag the gold bar into there. So now whenever we want to put a gold bar into our menu, or into our into our game, we can just click and drag from here and pop it into wherever we want in the world. They're appearing in the ground, which is kind of a bit weird, but that's okay. So we've got these guys here. I'm going to just delete them for now. But the reason we make them a prefab is because if we make any changes to this object, such as what we're going to do is add some animations to this, if we make any changes to it, we can have them apply to the prefab, so that every single copy of this gold bar will be able to do the exact same thing. So we have our gold bar. We're going to add a little animation to make this little thing move up and down. We need to deactivate the animator that's currently on it. So we're going to deactivate that, or else that'll interrupt with whatever kind of animations we want to do. And we click back up onto gold bar. We'll go to our animation window, and we're going to create a new animation. And we'll put because we already had our prefabs folder open, it starts off by default in there. So within that, we're going to create an animation folder. Animation. And this will be an animation for just gold bar. It's going to be very simple and very straightforward. All we're going to do is make it just bob up and down gently within the world. So to do that, we're just going to turn on the recording. I'm going to go to frame 30 here, and I'm just going to make it drag down its position a little bit like that. That might be a bit too much actually looking at it, but that's okay. Oh no, sorry, we're doing the wrong thing. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is move the child object, not the gold bar itself, because or else it'll get fixed in that position within the world. We want to move the little child object like this. We actually need to remove the animator, not just disable it. I just realized. Yeah, so we've removed the animator, so now we can do the animation that's based on the top gold bar. So we'll turn on our record. You can see our Y is at 0 because we're at the center, and we just drag it down a little bit, around about there, I think. Oh, well, I made another little mistake. We should move our timeline along. We should move to 30, and then we move it down. So move it down to there, and then we can copy this first frame by hitting Control and C, and we go to 1 second in, and paste it back in there. And now if we press play, we'll see the gold bar is bouncing and hovering within the world. So if we press play now, we can see there's the gold bar. It's a little bit more interesting. It's more active within the world than just being static. Okay, so let's make it so this gold bar is something that we can actually use. So we need to, first of all, to make the gold bar something that we can interact with, we need to give it a collider. So we're going to give it a box collider. So we add component, start typing box, and we get box collider. You can see that makes a very, very big box around it, so we don't want it quite that big. So we're going to set the size to 0.5 on all sides, not 5.5. There we go. The gold bar itself actually looks kind of off center within that box, so I'm going to move it a little bit so it looks a little bit more sensible. Not that that really matters. No, actually, we'll just leave it where it is. We don't need to be too accurate, because this box doesn't actually need to be all that accurate. It's kind of like when the player gets close to it, we want the player to be able to pick it up. So we've got this box collider, but we want to make sure it's also a trigger, or else when the player tries to touch the box, it'll just be touching a solid box. We need it to be a transparent, kind of interactive thing. So we set it as is trigger, so then when we press play, the player is still able to run through the object. If I was to just, while we have this paused, set this box to be not a trigger, and we try to go through it, we can't go through it, the player gets stuck on it. So we don't want that happening. So we'll unplay the game. Okay, so we have that there. How are we going to make it so that we can keep track of whether the player picks up these gold bars? Well, we're going to need two scripts added into our game. We're going to need a script for the gold bar itself. So create a C# script that we'll call gold pickup. And we're going to need another script called game manager. And a game manager is something that we're going to use to run a variety of things in our game. For example, keeping track of the score and respawning the player when we die and things like that. Various basic game mechanics that we want to have kept track of. So we have our game manager. So let's create a new empty object in our hierarchy that we're going to call game manager, because we need a script to be on an object within the world. So we'll click and drag this script onto our game manager, and then on our gold bar we're going to click and drag the gold pickup. So to be able to do anything with our gold pickup, essentially what we're going to want it to do is say, tell the game manager script how many coins we have. So if we want to tell the game manager scripts how many coin, or that we've picked up another coin, the game manager needs to be keeping track of how many coins it has. So we're going to do something in the game manager script first of all. Let me just let this reload the solution. And up here, we're just going to create a public int for current gold. And that'll just keep track of how much gold do we have. And then instead of using start or update, what we're going to use is a custom function that we're going to use to add the gold to the player. So we're going to say public void, which is what we need to say at the start of any function, and just say add gold. And how much gold do we want to add? Well, that's whatever we tell our specific gold object to be. And we're going to say in this brackets, we're going to say int gold to add. And int gold to add is going to be however many gold we want to add on to our current gold. So let's add our curly brackets. And basically all we want to do is say, okay, from our gold script, we'll send in a value into this here. So we'll basically say add gold, say bracket 1. Or we could say add gold bracket 5 or whatever. And then we'll say, okay, add that to however much current gold we currently have. So all we have to say is current gold plus equals gold to add. So what plus equals does is just, it's a shorthand way of saying current gold is equal to current gold plus gold to add. So basically by saying plus equals, you're saying just add on anything on the other side of the equals sign here. So that's nice and straightforward. We can save that. We can go back into our game here. Of course, at the moment that won't actually do anything, but on our game manager, we now have a value for our current gold. So let's add something to our gold pickup script. Our gold pickup script, we need to have, if you go back to the game manager here, we want to pass in a value. So we want an int value that we send in to say, okay, this is how much gold you want to add onto the player. So in here, we're going to add a public int, we'll call it value. So how much value is on our gold at the moment. And then here, instead of using start and update, we're going to use another default function built into Unity. So we're not creating a new function here, but we're using private void. Oh, no, that's not private. Pirate void. No, private void on trigger enter bracket. And so Visual Studio auto completes it for me, but we're basically saying on trigger enter whenever another collider enters the trigger attached to this script. So we know that this script is attached to our gold bar, which has the trigger box. So whenever another collider enters this trigger area, this little section of the code gets called. So if another object runs into our trigger area, well, we need to check and see, is that the player that ran into our area? And we can do that using tags, which is a handy dandy little system built into Unity by default. So we can say if other, so if the other object, the other collider that entered, if that other dot tag is equal to player. So basically we're saying, does the other object have a tag of player attached to it? So how can we make sure our player has that tag? Well, all we have to do is go back into Unity. Now we know we've called our player, and it's spelled the exact same way. But what we need to do is go over here to where we have the tag drop down, click on this, and by default there's a player tag included within the game. You can add more tags for sorting different objects and stuff like that. But we want to use the player tag. So we're going to set this as tag player. And we'll go back to our script. So now we know that say that the collider that just entered is the player collider. So with that information, we can go and add the value onto the game manager. So to be able to access the game manager, we need to find it within the world. So we need to go find object of type, and then in sharp brackets say game manager. So we're looking for any object within the world that has the game manager script attached to it. And we'll only have one of those within the world at any time, so we know that we're finding the exact one that's active in the level. So find object of type game manager, and then we put two little brackets, dot add gold. So basically what we're saying is find the game manager object and then run the add gold function. And within the add gold, we need to say how much gold are we going to add. Well, how much gold we're going to add is whatever value we set up on our coin. As we know, we have the int value up here. So that's fine. We find that. But obviously, when our player picks up the coin, the gold bar, we don't want that gold bar to stay within the world. We need it to disappear, or else the player can just keep picking up the same object over and over and over, and that's not very useful for us. So what we'll do at the end here is just say destroy game object. And what that'll do is it'll destroy whatever game object this script is attached to. So it'll remove it from the world and we don't have to worry about it anymore. So we'll save this, go back into Unity, let it compile for a second. Go to our gold bar, we're going to set the value to be 1, like that. And now I'm going to highlight the game manager here so that we can keep an eye on our current gold value, which obviously starts out at 0. But if I run away for a second and then run back towards it, we pick it up, our object disappears, and now our current gold over here is set to be 1. So perfect. That's working just the way we want it to. So let's take, how can we display that on screen? Well, we're going to need to use Unity's UI system, which is, it can be confusing and get a little bit complicated the more you look into it at times. But we're going to keep it nice and simple, nice and straightforward. We're going to go to Game Object up here, UI, and Text. We're going to add a UI text object. Now, you might not be able to see your UI within the world. We can see it here, and because we're in a 3D space, it kind of looks a bit weird. So what we need to do is, using these objects here, we can, if we rotate our perspective a little bit like this, we can see, okay, we can see the UI by the edges here, but it's still at a weird perspective. So when we're kind of looking at it almost face on, what we can do is hit this little object here, and that'll make us go perfectly flat so we can see anything within the world. And now if we go and double click on our text here, we can see where it is within the world. But if we double click on the canvas, now you can see this is the canvas that our UI down here is filling into. So what I'll do is I'm going to click and drag this bit of text all the way over here, and now you can see it zooming around in our camera view. So wherever we put it within the canvas here, it goes into the same place within the camera view. So I'm going to put it up in the top corner here. Let's zoom back in on our text like this. I'm going to set this alignment to be to the right, and you can see our text jumps over to the right, so I'm going to put it there now. And within this, we're going to say gold 0 for now. Let's make the font size a little bit bigger. We'll make it bold so it stands out, and we'll change the color to a more kind of fun, kind of orangey color, maybe a little bit more red. There we go. Okay, so we've got our gold in the top right corner here. Using these little pivot points things can get a little bit confusing, but because the basic thing to remember is base it on wherever the UI should be within the screen. So at the moment our gold is in the top right corner, but it's basing its pivot on the center. So we're going to just change this to be in the top right. And that way, whenever the screen size here changes, this little bit of text will always stay in the top right corner for us. So we have our text. Now we need to be able to tell it what it should say. Because at the moment, if we press play and we run, we pick up that gold. Our bit of text on the screen obviously doesn't update, but we know that we're storing the value of 1 in our menu. So, or in our game manager. So we need a reference to this text to be able to update it. And to do that, we go into our game manager. If we want to use any of Unity's built-in UI stuff, we have to go up to the very top up here and type in using Unity engine .ui, like that. You don't want to add it on to using Unity engine up here, because that'll kind of overwrite it and you won't be able to use a lot of the default things. Oh, I just realized, no, we are on the game manager. Oh, that's okay. For a second I thought we were still on the gold pickup script. But if you just added .ui here, it would overwrite that and you'd eliminate being able to use a lot of stuff that Unity uses. So what we need is a reference to the text object that contains the bit of text that we have. So we need to go here, public text, gold text. And that's fine. And then what we want to do is whenever we get more gold, we want to update what the text says. So the way we do that is go Okay, access the gold text object that we just created. Or not that we just created, that we just created a reference to up here. And within that gold text object, so what that means is that's referring to this whole script here. And you can see this bit here is the bit we want to edit, and that's the bit underneath the text kind of box here. This is a text box. So what we need to do is go into the gold text script and access the text component. So we'll say gold text dot text. That's what we want to access there, and we're going to set that to be equal to quotation mark gold and then a little space after it. So we want to say that's a bit of text we want to have, and then the value we want to give it is, we say plus current gold. And the way that'll write out on the screen is it'll write whatever we have there, gold, and it'll add a space, and then we'll add on as the next thing on this whatever our current gold is. And if we wanted to have more text after that, for example, maybe an exclamation mark, for example, we'd say plus again, and then a quotation mark, and an exclamation mark, and another quotation mark at the end. So we could save this, go back into Unity here, let it compile, and then on our game manager we need to drag that text object in. So drag the text over to there. Now if we press play, so our gold in the top right corner stays the same. And now if I go run over here, I pick it up, and we see now it says on screen exactly how many gold we have. So let's just stop this and run it again and just create a bunch of these gold bars. I'm gonna move the camera around so it's not just facing straight on there anymore. So let's create a few of these here. So I'm going to duplicate you, just pop a few around, let's put a couple up here as well, like that. And now we press play, we can run around and collect all of these various bits of gold, and you can see as we're going we now have our exact number of how much gold we have. So perfect, that's exactly what we wanted to do. One thing that would be handy would be to have a nice little kind of effect when we pick up a coin. So in the next video we're going to take a look at adding a very simple particle effect to make it look a little bit more fancy when we collect our gold coins. So thanks for watching this episode, and I'll be back soon with more tutorial goodness.